How's it going, guys? Cody back again, dropping yet another video. This time, guys, a story in the Independent. Figures released on Thursday, just gone, about record levels of self-harm in our prisons. A lot of media say it's crisis hit. Me, as a former prisoner, think it's beyond fucking words. It's shocking, but it isn't surprising. Headline reads: self-harming in prisons at record high in England and Wales, with a new incident every 10 minutes. Like I said, guys, this is in the Independent. There is a link in the description below, like you always do. Let's read it. Government data also shows suicide rates among former prisoners in the community are up a fifth in a year. A prisoner self-harms every 10 minutes in jails across England and Wales, according to new data showing the number of incidents has surged to a record high. Government figures released on Thursday reveal 60,594 inmates harmed themselves in the 12 months to June 2019, which is up 22% from the same period in the previous year. Violence in our jails has also increased again, with 34,112 assault incidents in the year, up 5% from the 12 months to June 2018. Among these, 10,424 were against members of staff, which is up 10%. The rate of suicides in our prison remained fairly stable, rising by just over 1%, with 90 inmates taking their lives in 2018 to 2019, compared with 80 the previous year. The number of former inmates taking their lives after leaving jail, meanwhile, has increased by a fifth, from 283 to 337 over the 12-month period, raising concerns offenders are not getting the support they need once they are released back into the community. The new figures come after a scathing report by the Committee of MPs accused the government of making policy by press release announcements that do nothing to tackle the long-term issues driving violence and reoffending. The Justice Committee said Boris Johnson's pledge to create thousands of new prison spaces and boost security inside our jails would not only address an enduring crisis of safety and decency. Peter Dawson, director of the Prison Reform Trust, says, "How can any government contemplate sending more people to prison on even longer sentences when it is failing to completely meet its duty of care to the individuals involved?" These terrible figures show that the prison system is not in a recovery. Politically motivated announcements over the summer can only make the situation even worse. And the Justice Committee's scathing report today correctly shows that the government has no plan to deal with the consequences. Responding to the 90 inmates who have taken their own lives, Deborah Coles, the Executive Director of Inquest, said, "These statistics are more than numbers. They represent real people in extreme distress, leading to preventable deaths and traumatic bereavements for families. As a society, we should not accept this endless cycle of systematic neglect and political indifference. The lack of accountability for these deaths and the abject failure of the system to prevent them is a moral and political disgrace." On the rise in self-inflicted deaths of offenders in the community, Ms. Cole said the incidents required urgent scrutiny and condemned the current lack of independent investigation. She added, "What is known is that these people are being released into a failing support systems, poverty and an absence of services for mental health and addictions. This state is abandonment. The violence..." I'll be able to get my words out, sorry guys. "This is the violence of austerity." In light of the rise in violence on staff, the Prison Officers Associations said the true figures would be in fact much worse due to rife levels of under-recording, and called on the government to urgently intervene to protect prison officers. What about prisoners? National Chair of the POA, Mark Fairhurst, said ministers have failed to fulfil its promise to roll out the use of powder spray, and a new key worker scheme was not reducing violence despite assurances that this was the way forward. "Our employer has dramatically failed to address violence and self-harm in our prisons. Empty promises will not curtain rail the life-changing injuries for both staff and prisoners face." A Ministry of Justice spokesperson said, accepted that levels of violence and self-harm in our prisons were unacceptably high, but said the government remained determined to make progress to ensure our jails reform offenders, reduce reoffending and keep the public safe. Here's the broken record. They added, Our 2.75 billion investment will modernise jails, set up a security to stop the flow of drugs and weapons which fuel these issues. We have trained over 25,000 staff in suicide and self-harm prevention and introduced the key worker scheme to give each prisoner a dedicated prison officer for support. Sorry guys, I'm struggling to get through that. My focus wasn't fully there. Now, Mark Fairhurst, the national chair of the POA, I've gone against him in a few interviews, right? Most notably was one where he was calling for tactical use of taser for prison officers. For those that don't know, the NTRG officers are National Tactical Response Group officers, the Tornado Squad, the Riot Squad officers, for those that don't know. They're actually trained in the use of taser. They are armed with taser, but they're not authorized to use it. Why would you give somebody something if they're not authorized to use it? But yeah, he wants to use tasers on prisoners. Now, like I say, a lot of these prisoners are mentally ill. Being in prison compounds mental health massively. That results in, obviously, self-harm, because the distress and which is compounded by prison is massive. And mental health services, guys, in our prisons it's inadequate, it's non-existent, and it's not fit for purpose. And sadly and tragically, what flows from that is self-harm, suicidal thoughts, suicides, and I'm sick of covering this issue. Again, record levels of assaults, record levels of self-harm. Right, we're on par to see record levels of suicides. Now, like I said, it's stated there was 80 suicides last year. No, there wasn't. There was 92 self-inflicted deaths last year, because they were the Ministry of Justice's own figures. And like I say, guys, not every death in custody is down to medical negligence, natural causes, or like suicide. Right, prisoners, Alan Marshall, key point in question, was murdered by prison officers at Sawton Jail in Edinburgh. God bless Alan Marshall. Justice for Alan Marshall. Like I say, where you've got contraband, you've got debt. Where you've got debt, you've got fear, intimidation, bullying and violence. It's that old record from me. But the amount of prisoners, right? The story was a bit shoddy, because it says it revealed that 60,594 inmates had harmed themselves in the 12 months to June 2019, up 22% from the same period in the previous year. No, what that should have said is 20,594 incidents of self-harm, because you do get because the prison population fluctuates between about 82,000 to about 86 plus thousand, right, give or take, right? Now, 60,594 inmates have not self-harmed, but you get a lot of offenders, prisoners, that are repeat self-harmers, unfortunately. And like I say, I've seen it firsthand in prison. I've seen people slashing up. I saw the kid throw himself off the landing, the twos at Forest Bank. These statistics should shock the government into action, but they don't care. These people are prisoners. Their lives are disposable. And Deborah Coles, who's the chief executive of the Inquest organisation, I don't see the point in her job, because her workload is such that they should bring accountability to prisons, and it should be corporate manslaughter charges when a prisoner dies in prison. If it's not self-inflicted death, it should be corporate manslaughter at the hands of the governor of the prison. And every prison officer that comes into contact with that prisoner should be dealt with. And even when it comes to suicides, you've got to look at the long paper trail, which, like I say, prison officers are given immunity for the most part, right? When they collate these figures, guys, about record levels of violence, I mean, it states here, let me just find it. So there were 34,112 assaults in the year, which was up 5% from the 12 months to June 2018. Among these, 10,424 of them were on members of staff, up 10%. It doesn't go on to say there was a few thousand assaults by prison officers on prisoners, because apparently, guys, that doesn't happen. Obviously, we know different. But like I say, guys, when mental health services are so inadequate and prisons are just simply cheap alternatives to high security psychiatric units, the amount of mentally ill prisoners that I've come into contact with in the prison system, and anyone that's been in prison has come into to contact with, or themselves suffered with mental health while being in prison, is shocking. Mentally ill prisoners should not be in prison. And I've seen kids in prison with mental health issues, and it doesn't get better, guys. It simply gets worse. And the most dangerous thing in prison, and I've said this in a million vlogs, isn't the understaffing, isn't the drugs, isn't the debt, isn't the violence. Most dangerous thing in prison? Your own mind. You start to think, you start to overthink, you start to overanalyze. A lot of these offenders, before they've ever been offenders, they've first been victims. They've had the most shocking starts in life. Physically abused, sexually abused, parents were addict, passed from pillar to post, grown up in care leavers. And that isn't an excuse for their criminality. Not everyone in prison is guilty, by the way. You've got people on holding charges, so on remand. You've got miscarriages of justice. And those prisoners that are offenders, before they've ever been offenders, for the most part, they've first been victims. People can't grasp the concept of that argument. And people see the offence and they want to punish that offence. But if they looked at the root cause of offending, say a guy's violent and because of he was abused when he was younger and he's grown up with his temper because he witnessed extreme violence and he's grown up in care and then he's left care. His head's just fucked, right? And then he becomes violent. He's smoking weed or he's taking drugs to numb the pain which he suffered from a childhood incident or a numerous childhood incidents, right? And then they become violent because they're a product of their environment. It's not just a violent person being violent. That's a person that's a product of their environment, a victim that became an offender. And this is the thing, though, but we don't see that. We see the crime and we want to punish the crime. And it's sad to see, guys. Like I say, a lot of these people, if they saw the root cause of offending for offenders, violence and such and everything like that, I think they'd have actually empathy and even sympathy for these individuals, not all of them. And like I say, we can't use our past as excuses for criminalities, but they can certainly be contributing factors in the criminality. But going back to this story and the mental health failings and everything within the system, it's beyond words, guys. And prisoners are leaving prison in body bags so often that body bags, unfortunately, are as much part of prison life as the staff. As the understaffing, the spice, the contraband that's getting into prisons, the corruption within the jails, sexual relationships between prisoners and prison officers. It's beyond words, guys. Body bags are part of prison life, unfortunately, now. And that's just unbelievable. People go to prison to be rehabilitated and they're paying with their lives, which is just fucking a joke. It's disgusting. It's disgraceful. And my heart goes out to all these families that have got someone in prison or lost somebody whilst being in prison. And you've got families there that have got mentally ill sons and daughters, because obviously we've got female offenders as well, in prisons up and down the country, from secure training centres to adult jails, to young offenders, to secure training centres, to women prisons, from Cat A's to Cat D's, right, that are suffering with mental health. And at any minute, their family are waiting by the phone, expecting that call, say, your son's dead. Your son's topped himself. And them calls are coming, guys. And nobody seems to give a shit. And it breaks my heart and it breaks my spirit. And the sheer amount of families I've spoken to, that's loved ones self-harming, suicidal thoughts, talking about suicide, died in prison, natural causes, suspicious circumstances, murdered in prison by prison officers, murdered by other prisoners, sought suicide as a way out, is absolutely off the scale. And again, there's no accountability, and it's just the system's broken. The criminal justice system is as broken as those that are entering it, chewed up and spat out the other side. And nothing will change, unfortunately. Shocking statistics, but not surprising. Really not surprising. the distress and the duress that is placed on a prisoner, that is placed in prison, right? People go, oh, they committed crime. Yeah, we know that. But there's kids in prison that could have been dealt with via tag, could have been given community orders, community payback orders, things like that, community service. And they just lock them up and throw away the key. I've seen kids go to prison for driving offences and leave prison in a body bag. Unbelievable. It's fucked, man. It's fucked, and it breaks my heart. And anyway, guys, let me know what you think about the story. Like, comment, subscribe. Cody out.